How we doing?
I think we're good. I think we're good. Ashley, is it 3 o'clock?
It is 3 o'clock.
All right. Well, I see that I recognize that a quorum is present. The PRB Education Committee meeting will come to order. We encourage all participants and listeners to please mute your microphones or telephones when you are not speaking. Also, before you speak, please state your name. We appreciate your patience if there arises any technical issue, and please know that we will try to resolve any technical issues immediately. Ashley, will you call the roll?
Yes. Chair Marcia Dush.
Present.
Robert Reese.
Present.
Okay.
All right, Ashley, would you go on and state if anyone has has pre-registered a list of people? I'm sorry. Will you provide a list of people who are pre-registered to provide comments?
Yes, there were no participants that had pre-registered to provide comments today.
All right. Is there anyone who would like to provide comment at the end of the meeting who did not pre-register? Please provide your name and comment topic. Ashley, is there anyone else on the Zoom?
Yes, there's only one other participant on via telephone.
Okay. Can you please identify yourself? Ashley will record names and topics if there are additional members of the public. All right, well, hearing none, I'm going to, at this point, call on Brian Burnham to provide some information on the background for the minimum education training.
Thank you, Marcia. My name is Brian Burnham. I'm the MET program specialist here with the Pension Review Board. And as you said, I would like to present a little bit of some background information about the education training, just a little bit of some history, and then kind of a look at what we're currently offering and where we're currently at. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Brian, but I'll just reset that because I was told that I was hard to hear. My name is Brian Burnham. I'm the staff's MET program specialist, and I would just like to go through a brief background and history of the program and then kind of get a look at what the program is offering currently, just for review for the board members, for the committee members. So for a brief history, it started back in 2013 when the legislature enacted some bylaws for us to implement a training requirement through rulemaking, make the training reasonably accessible to everyone over the internet. Also accredit other organizations to offer their own training that meets the rules and specifications that we create, and develop a system to track the compliance and report it biannually. For this task, the Pension Review Board did receive one open position, but no additional resources were granted for the program besides the hiring of that employee. And then for the rules, in order to create the rules, a working group was established that consisted of board members and representatives of Texas Systems. One of the main things that they decided on was focusing on what topic areas are going to be essential for this program. And the topic areas were broken up into two different topics. They were core and non-core. And the core topics were identified as the fundamental competencies for public pension plans that would be necessary for system administrators and trustees in order to perform their duties. And then the non-core topics were the other topics that were relevant to a trustee or administrator's duty that go kind of beyond that initial fundamentals and just help to further their expertise. And then a little bit more detail on the program. So when new trustees and administrators are within their very first year of the program, they must undergo a minimum of 7 hours of training. And that 7 hours of training must include all 7 of those core topic areas that were previously identified as fundamental. You can see on the bottom of this chart, there's the core content areas required. It's fiduciary matters, governance, ethics, investments, actuarial matters, benefits administration, and risk management. Once they've completed those 7 hours and those 7 core topics, in their second year and moving forward continuously, they enter a cycle that we like to call continuing education, or we'll see it abbreviated as CE throughout this presentation. And for the continuing education program, they must have a minimum of 4 hours of training every 2 years. And this training is a little bit less strict on what it has to be. They can get this 4 hours in any of the core or non-core topic areas that are represented in the chart below. And then in order to help kind of move these programs along and guide, especially really guiding the accredited sponsors that we'll talk about a little bit more later, the working group created a curriculum guide. And the guide basically covers topics and objective points for all 7 of the core content areas, as well as just some general topics that you would traditionally see covered by those non-core content areas. And the importance of the guide is that any courses that are eligible, have been deemed eligible to provide core content learning, they must cover every single learning objective that's under a core topic. Whereas continuing education courses, they can tend to focus just more on one or a few areas of discussion because CE is generally designed just to drill down into specific areas, providing more advanced training for trustees to learn about. And then you'll see on the next page, there's going to be an example of what we have in the curriculum guide. This one specifically is for actuarial matters. You'll notice it has the key terms and definitions, actuarial assumptions, and other objectives listed out, and then, the topics listed out that it needs to cover, and then all of the objectives that the course must meet. And so for any core course, it has to meet everything you see listed on this page for it to gain content for credit for an actuarial course. And the curriculum guide in its full is offered in the appendix if you wanted to reference more of it on your own.
And it's also located on the PRB website, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So our accredited sponsors, they are organizations that we have approved to offer core and or CE training to our DB plan trustees and administrators. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, sponsors accredited for core, they need to show that their courses covered all of the learning objectives in the curriculum guide. So essentially they would give us a sample course that we would review, and we look through the course and we kind of like do a little checklist and make sure that every single one of those topics and objectives is being met. And before we even give them credit for core, they have to show the capability of doing that. And then we would, if they've met the requirements, then we would grant them the core accreditation, and they would be able to go forth and offer that training to any of the people who would take their courses.
Great. Okay.
A listing of those things is always shown on our website, all of the accredited sponsors that we currently host. And beyond just accredited sponsors, you can also gain MET credits through organizations that haven't been sponsored by us. And the process for them doing that is basically they would send us an application form that we have on our website that they fill out and grant us additional materials that we can look over the courses. And it basically goes over the same type of material that we would do for accredited sponsors. So if they're looking for core credit with this course, these non-sponsored entities still need to meet every single one of those objectives listed and every single one of those topics covered for a core competency area. And if they're just looking for the continuing education credit, we just need to basically look at it and make sure that the topic is on one of those areas, that they're covering something relevant to our pension trustees. And there's a few more basics that we look for, but that's kind of the general gist of it.
Brian, does the sponsor have to apply then for the individual course, or is it the person who's trying to take the course show the materials?
So it's generally going to be for like if a trustee goes out and they find a nice like investing course that's done by like Greystone or somebody who's not accredited with us. What would end up happening is they would then go to their plan administrator and basically ask, hey, can I get MET program credits for this? And the administrator would come to us and say, one of our trustees is interested in this course. Can you look through this and see if we can be granted credits for this course? And then they would fill out that application, send it to us, and we would get the materials we need to be able to review that course and find out if it meets the program standards or not.
Okay.
And I can just add that it can go the other way as well. We have sponsors who have had the desire to simply offer one specific course. Usually that's something they're not planning to repeat throughout time, and we can accredit that for them. And then if they are going to offer it on a repeating basis, we generally talk to them about the advantages of becoming an accredited sponsor, because it's at that point administratively easy for both them and us.
Okay.
And so Brian, can I assume that when I click through to one of these sponsor sites, any course that I find on that site, I'm eligible for credit for?
That is not always going to be the case. So the MET program, especially if it's CE, it's pretty broad, or continuing education. It just generally has to be something like one of those core or non-core topics. If it's within that reach, then it's likely going to be approved for the credit. But the gist is it has to be related to their duties as a pension trustee or a system administrator. So something that would typically go, what I've seen sometimes is some people would take some courses on insurance and getting kind of like an insurance accreditation or other things that are a little bit unrelated to their duties as a pension trustee, because they have a job outside of their pension trustee training that they're doing a job like they're doing training for already. We've looked at some of those courses and we've determined that those wouldn't meet those bylaws. And so we do have some organizations that are our sponsor do concentrate on other areas beyond just pensions. And so there is a case that you might run into some of those organizations that are more broad in their scope that would have some training available that isn't related to duties of a Texas pension administrator or trustee.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, but there is some work to be done by the user beyond just going to the site, selecting a course. There's additional vetting that has to occur. Okay.
There is, and the way that we handled that when we set up the program was to put that responsibility on the sponsor, much like in continuing legal education.
Sure.
The sponsor by rule is required to designate and make very clear if a course is accredited and can count for MET credit, the course must reflect that clearly in writing. And I think it's a good point that you bring up. We need to make sure we're doing a good job of communicating that to trustees and administrators.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I would say we've thankfully not had a lot of confusion or questions about whether things count. So I think that sponsors are doing a pretty good job with that.
Okay, great.
And so currently, a snapshot of kind of what our sponsors look like currently. We have 22 accredited sponsors. 10 of those sponsors are retirement systems themselves. And so that would leave the remaining of them to kind of be these third-party entities, kind of like your TechSpers or your NCPers are kind of two of our bigger ones. And 8 of those sponsors are approved to offer both the core and CE training. And so 14 are only offering continuing education training at this time. And so back in June of 2018, we presented this survey at our meeting because it was asked for by the board at a previous meeting. And basically, we just wanted to share this with you guys to basically show that we did a survey of our sponsors based off of satisfaction that they've received. Now, every sponsor is required to basically run a customer survey when they're done with their course or their presentation, or however they're basically relaying the information to the individuals. And so 12 of the sponsors submitted their survey data to us for us to look at. And the results were very good, as you can see. The average satisfaction across all accredited sponsors was 99%. But if you look at the list, the vast majority had 100% overall satisfaction, with the lowest being 2 plans at 98%. So what this really told us was that our sponsors have been doing a great job of offering this service to anybody who goes and looks for it. And so we haven't had complaints at all, I don't believe, about any of our sponsoring entities. We're quite happy with the job that they're doing. Now to move on to our own courses, we currently have 7 online core courses. So these are kind of basic courses to go over those 7 fundamental concepts that were identified earlier. And the purpose of the courses are basically to give the trustees that background foundation that they're going to need in order to do their job. So that's what they were essentially designed to do. And that's what we believe they do a very good job of accomplishing. The courses are basically set up to be a bunch of they give grant information that the readers or the takers would read through. And then throughout this information, there's some knowledge checks that will be spread in there just to kind of like test them on what they're going through, so that they don't have to do like multiple slides of information all by itself, without, something to really probe their knowledge. And then at the very end of it, we have a final quiz. And with that final quiz, they must answer 70% of the questions correctly in order to pass the course. Once they pass that course, we provide certificates to the participants. Now, I do want to point out that our certificates were generated with Adobe Flash, which is no longer being supported by Adobe. So there's a situation currently with our certificates where they're not auto-generating for anybody who takes our courses. So what we've done in the short term to address that is we've asked all of our plan administrators that whenever they have a trustee or themselves who need certificates, they just basically send us an email, contact us, and let us know that they've completed the course and they would like their certificate. And then we're able to kind of go into our grade book and review that they've passed the course and just confirm it. And then we can create the certificate and send it to them. We're currently looking into more long-term solutions to fix that issue so that we don't have to continually to do it manually, but that's kind of where we're at currently with that situation due to software limitation.
Okay, Brian, just a couple of questions. So right now, PRB is only providing education on core topics.
Correct.
There's no other courses on anything but the 7 core topics, correct?
Correct. Now, plans can take these topics for continuing education, because continuing education can be any core topic or any non-core topic. It just has to basically be relevant to those, to any of those topics that were identified. So so people in their continuing education cycles can take our courses and gain credit for them as long as they take 4 hours worth of credits for it. But the courses were really designed to meet that core requirement. And so they're not going to get that advanced knowledge from the courses that they might be seeking elsewhere.
Can they take them multiple times?
Yes. Currently, there is nothing that would prevent them from doing that.
Okay. And again, just confirming right now, what we have are 7 online courses. We do not provide any in-person training.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And just one final point. We're currently at over 3,900 courses having been completed since the implementation of the program. So we're closing in on 4,000 plus coming into the next year with these courses. So that's a pretty cool number to see that it's so widely used, and it's been helpful for quite a lot of people.
Good.
As far as utilization of the training goes, this chart is going to be a little bit dated as it's before the pandemic. It's back in June 2019 is when we accumulated this and presented it at a PRB meeting due to it being asked to see who was utilizing what type of training and for what purpose. And from the chart, overwhelming 68%, almost 70% are using our course for their first year core content. And when you look at the other options, TaxPers was about the second most used with their basic trustee training program that they offer during their annual conferences. That totaled out to be around 23% of the usage for core. For continuing education, TaxPers is the leader in that with around 50% of the training being taken by them. We're only around 15% for the continuing education, and about 14% of it was done by their own retirement system in-house. And this data was gathered from essentially, we get this data that they report to us every single year. It used to be they would report to us twice annually. Now they only report to us once annually. But they basically report what type of training they got, who provided the training. And so we're able to look at our database and kind of accumulate this and pull these records and look at it. We hadn't done it recently, but I would say that due to the pandemic and the loss of a lot of the live conferences from last year, the virtual option that we provided with our PRB online course was a really big thing that a lot of plans were looking for. And so I think our number would end up being higher for CE if we looked at it now, simply because of the issues that the pandemic caused with what's available out there during that situation. But I do want to do a shout out, and we do have sponsors that do offer virtual training. I know TaxPers stepped up and offered webinars during the pandemic last year. I know NCPers is offering webinars, and we've had some new sponsors that also offer online training. One of them very similar to ours. They kind of offer like course modules online that you can look at and take tests based on to check your knowledge.
Brian, and this is Michelle Downey Crane's Deputy Director. I'm sorry, I'm out of practice and haven't been identifying myself. I'll just quickly add on here, something we're very proud of that contributes to the fact that we're offering such a large portion of the core that's being taken out there is that has resulted in some of the larger statewide systems, teacher retirement system and Texas Municipal, have actually stopped applying for credit to offer core and have told us that's because they know that they can have their trustees take our online courses. And we've just received that as great confirmation of the quality of what we've produced. And in some ways, I think good evidence that we've specialized well to focus on the core and be able to provide that to ensure that all systems our trustees are getting that fundamental first year foundational knowledge, and certainly doesn't preclude us from venturing into continuing education. That's something we've always wanted to do, and part of what I know you all are here to talk about today. But I do take great pride in seeing that we are, I believe, serving that core need.
Thank you, Michelle. The reason we're having this meeting in this committee, I guess, has not met for a couple of years, is that what we'll go on to discuss next is some survey results that show that our stakeholders are asking us for a little more. So I think it's been great to level set where we came from, what we're doing now. And then, and maybe it's because of the pandemic that our stakeholders are asking us for more, because they've been dependent on webinars over the last 18 months or so. But so I guess at this point, I think I want to go back to Brian to talk about these survey results that we got, and that'll lead us into talking about what do we do next. So Brian, back to you.
Certainly, thank you. So we saw a lot of the survey results during the previous board meeting we had last month, where we talked about the Educational Services Survey as a whole. And for this one, we really just want to focus on our MET program, because the survey, obviously, as you can see in that little chart to the right, it talks about some other things like our news clips, our data center, our TELFR reporting, but we really want to focus on the MET program. And we had nearly a 93% satisfaction rate with the MET program. And that's well in line with what we've been seeing in past surveys. We had a 2017 and 2019 survey on the MET program as well, and they were both well over 92. They were both over 92% in their satisfaction ratings as well. So overall, the program has shown to be a good hit with our users. But that said, there are some comments that we do receive, and rather than bore you by reading them all out verbatim, I just wanted to kind of focus on, these are kind of content or comments that kind of go in line together. We categorize them as course content, desire for more CE courses, desire for additional topics, particularly plan administration, but there's a common theme among them. And the common theme is simply that they're looking for some more advanced training. They like what we offer with our core trainings. They like the ease of access with what we're able to offer, and they would appreciate it if we expanded our program to basically show some more, maybe more focused topics rather than kind of the broad general fundamentals that we cover with the 7 core. And all of these comments can be seen in the appendix, because we do have the entire survey located there. But I just wanted to open this up to if you had any questions about any of these specific comments or not.
Brian, wasn't there also a comment, and maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, but there was some desire for us to provide in-person training, or they're looking for more in-person training?
Yes. So maybe someone can speak in if I don't remember this properly, but I believe in the past, the Pension Review Board did hold our own conferences. And I think they were alluding to those and how they kind of like the setup of the in-person conferences. I know a lot of people love the Techsters conference and the networking and everything that goes along with it. So I believe they were kind of hinting at the idea of it would be nice to maybe add that model to what we're already doing and maybe host something along those lines.
Okay, well, I think that takes us to our next item, which is where do we go from here? And Brian, I'm going to continue to call on you here, but I think what would like to know is, along as you discuss these items, I'm really sensitive to what the staff capability is with respect to updating or providing new courses. So, if you could start off by telling us what you already have on the drawing board and what you think you can accomplish perhaps in the next, before the next legislative session.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So currently, we started this year with a plan to update our 7 core courses. We were going to do it over the course of this full year. And the objective was really to focus in on updating the plans for looking for industry standards and changes to law that needed updating. But the survey results and other forms of feedback that we've received has kind of caused us to shift gears a little bit in an effort to be responsive to those system needs. So now, rather than trying to review and update all 7, we've kind of focused in on just 4 courses that we believe really need these updates. And so we're really working on like our actuarial course, our investments, benefits, and our governance courses. Those are the ones that we've identified that have laws that have happened in this session or previous sessions that need to be updated, or industry standards that need to be basically included. That because as you would know, the actuarial world is an ever-changing world, and there's lots of discussions going on with what's acceptable, and we want to make sure that our courses are reflecting what those are stating.
How do you plan to go about updating those courses?
So we're working on them in-house currently, kind of getting some rough drafts of like some courses written up, updating the language, and then, I'm sorry, Ashley, you wanted to say something?
Sure. Ashley Rendon. We started these courses by doing a full review to see what, where, as Brian was saying, we are looking to see what industry standards or what Texas laws, what has changed, and where in our courses, would they affect the material that's in our courses. And so those are the main focuses of the changes that we'd like to make. So doing that, kind of having, assigning staff to a course, focusing on that, focusing on laws and best practices, and then, just going through that editing that way. And so we're thinking, we should be able to have at least one. We're, like Brian said, we're kind of doing all 4 at the same time, and hoping by the November meeting we'll have one of those updated. And also incorporating the feedback that we've gotten. Each one of those courses has an evaluation at the end of it. It's optional, so we get them here and there. We had a lot in the when we initially rolled out those courses, as I think probably new participants take them for the first time. We might get evaluations in that way, but we also get feedback from that. So incorporating, taking a look at that feedback where maybe they're having trouble, they're reading something that doesn't seem like it's making sense to them, or having trouble with a concept. How can we make that concept easier to understand? And so we're looking at those kinds of things as well with those courses.
How are you doing a review process? If you update it, is there a review done by legal, or what is the review process?
So we're doing that. The immediate first review is just done by, we have staff looking at that. We also, and then we To my knowledge, Michelle, I'm not sure, but we haven't done any kind of going through legal, but
I'll jump in. Thank you,
Sure.
Ashley. Ms. Dush, when we created the courses initially, we had a 3-tier review, essentially, senior staff and industry expert. And so we received help from many qualified individuals in the field who work for retirement systems or as consultants to investment or actuarial. And then legal review in the case where legal information is being presented. So clearly, not all of our courses require that, but on ethics and fiduciary, we did ask our general counsel and outside legal counsel to look at those. So I appreciate you asking that question. And I think the standard on this review, since we're not wholesale overhauling or changing, but rather doing updates, I think we would probably not think. We will plan to use a lighter review standard. However, that will include an expert. So in the case of actuarial, most certainly yourself or staff actuary, if we have one at that point. And then legal, I think we'll be able to only send changes that we make to make that review quicker and easier.
Okay, well, I do suggest that with respect to these core courses, we have expertise on the board. You talked about updating actuarial, investment, benefits, and governance. I would think you could, name a board member whose expertise falls in those realms to partner and be one of the reviewers before the update is finalized.
Thank you for that. We are so fortunate to have the board composition that we do and appreciate the great feedback.
Okay. So then let's talk about what are some ideas for, based on the stakeholder input, what kinds of things could we design for continuing education, non-core courses?
I'll take that one. Michelle Downey Cranes. We were thinking that given resource levels and combined with need, we're already getting a lot, as you would expect, of questions about how the changes in law to the Funding Soundness Restoration Plan statute will be implemented. We think it would be a great use of resources. We'll actually be presenting on that topic at several conferences coming up. So we'll be able, I believe, quite easily to take those presentations and turn them into an educational offering, which will both, I hope, clarify and provide understanding and answer a lot of the frequently asked questions that we're getting regarding the statute, and then also act as a launching point for our upcoming rulemaking in that area, so that we are communicating with stakeholders and know what items might need to be clarified through rule. So I'd say that on one side. And then if we're able to produce 2 continuing education offerings, I think there was a comment on one of the slides that Brian showed from a Texas local firefighter plan that is something we've heard frequently and for many years from those TELFR plans, and that is that they would like to receive education specifically focusing on the day-to-day administration of a pension plan. And that is an area that, of course, we're specifically mandated by statute to provide tailored TELFR-specific education that addresses the unique needs of those smaller plans. And topics, to give you examples that we've been asked, we do receive requests for technical assistance regularly from local firefighter plans, and things that we're often asked about, I think could be a good way to gauge interest for topics. So I'll give you examples such as we're asked for help and guidance on going out for RFP for consulting services. Do we have templates for RFPs? Can we give guidance on that process and best practices? Another would be how to run successful board meetings, from agendas to Robert's rules to minutes and posting requirements are questions that we get, as well as more technical issues like Quadro, qualified domestic relation order, and how to administer those.
Well, all right. So do we, correct me if I'm wrong, but is there a manual that we provide to the TELFRA plans? And has that been updated recently?
They have, the TELFRA Association, I think it's called, has had a manual for many years that, in my personal opinion, has been a very useful tool. They give it to new trustees to help them fulfill their role and understand the requirements on TELFRA systems. So we have offered to partner with the TELFRA board and review that manual and see if we can, add to it, update it, because I think it hasn't been updated in a number of years. And so we're currently looking at that and trying to offer improvement, which could lead very nicely into some targeted continuing education offerings based on our work on that manual.
Yeah, I think that would be ideal, which is as you update or work with them to update the manual, you can pick out sections that could be expanded upon in specific continuing education. Rob, I'm going to ask you, I know you're new to the board and new to pensions. Do you have any ideas? I've got a couple that I would like to at least get recorded in the minutes here about other ideas for continuing ed, knowing that we probably can't get to much more than perhaps what we've already discussed. But any thoughts from you on this yet?
I don't have any specific topics for trainings that I would really offer today. A couple of thoughts though. We mentioned TRS, TMRS are sort of pulling back or have stopped offering core courses for their trustees. My first thought was, well, we should counter with a request to partner with some of those larger organizations that do have more resources to maybe work with them to create some additional trainings. And I think while I don't have a topic in mind, and this may already be out there, but I really think that case-based training, at least for me personally, is most effective in that you take a particular instance, explain the circumstances, explain how best practices were applied or not applied, and then walk through some of the implications of applying or not applying those best practices to that particular instance. And if we had the opportunity to partner with some of these larger systems that have probably encountered most anything that a retirement system can encounter, it might be a useful opportunity to take some of those, particularly if they're on instances or issues that some of the TELFRA or smaller plans ask about frequently, and create sort of a case-based training on some of those topics. And like I said, some of that case-based work may already be out there. It may be in some of our training and I just don't remember it or missed it. But for me personally, like I said, it's the most useful way for a training to stick and have an impact for me.
Rob, I really like that. The first suggestion that I was going to make was I really think that we need to incorporate something into continuing education regarding cybersecurity. And, Teachers has just gone through, a very difficult situation with a cyber attack. And so again, if we could ask them perhaps to do a case on their attack and how they've responded and what did they find out? What did they do to correct things going forward? I think that would be a really nifty addition to our continuing education. The other thing, as an actuary, and we've talked about this in a lot of board meetings, a lot of actuarial committee meetings, but I just don't see our systems using asset liability modeling to answer important questions about what their funding futures are. And so I would also like to see at some point getting a continuing ed course on the use and what does an asset liability study look like. I think we already talked about, I think Brian, you brought up, just kind of how information on developing investment policies or responding to the new law on funding policies, doing RFPs on actuarial or investment or trustees. I mean, I think, like I said, I want to get that into the minutes for this meeting as being, boy, I'd like to see that next up when there's some staff time and resources. But perhaps we could also look into, like I said, maybe like Rob suggested, partnering with one of the bigger systems on one of these areas to get something out there. I think that would be great. So I guess the next thing is, Ashley, I guess I'm going to ask you to maybe talk to us about what the work plan is for updating courses, or maybe trying to get some of these new ideas onto the course offerings.
Thank you. So we did talk a little bit, I know Michelle kind of mentioned it, but in this one, what in this item, what we're trying to do is look at our workload, and given the feedback that we were given and timing, and how could or would we provide additional CE courses ourselves in the near future. And so for this item, we don't have materials, but we did want to, Michelle kind of mentioned it, if we pull back on that full review of all of 7 courses for core, then we should be able to, before next session, provide 2 CE courses. And then, think about what topics we should be able to do. But with staff has started kind of looking into things such as, what kinds of formats of courses we could do that are not so similar, the way that our current course, the core courses are, you click through slides and take knowledge checks, and then a course or a quiz at the end. We've been looking into other formats such as webinars, or or videos, or things like that, looking around to see what other agencies are putting out for their education and training. And so with that, if we could possibly plan to get 2 courses out by next session, we think that could happen.
Okay, well, thank you. I know that we committed to report to the board at their next board meeting on progress here. So I guess at this point, I think perhaps we need a motion. And Rob, I'm going to ask you to make a motion that we direct the staff to research and develop recommendations for continuing ed courses to present to the full board at its November meeting.
So moved. Does
And
that work?
we're the quorum, so I second it. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. So at this point, I think we're just ready to move on to talk about date and location of our next education meeting. And honestly, I think that's going to depend on what we hear at the next board meeting. So I think we'll leave it to be determined at this time. At this point, I would say if there is anyone in the audience who would like to comment on what we discussed today, or please state your name and give us some input, provide us some feedback. All right. If there is no further business and no objections, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Rob, do you have anything else at this point?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So I move to adjourn the meeting. Rob, will you please second?
A second.
And the meeting is therefore adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Ashley, is there anything else we need to do at this time?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.